Rain came down in hard, unrelenting sheets, the kind of storm that soaked through uniforms and turned the ground beneath the boots of cadets into rivers of mud. At the military academy's training camp, the night drills were designed to test limits, to break weak spirits, to forge warriors who could stand unshaken in the face of chaos. Among them was a young cadet who had quickly gained a reputation not for strength or lineage, but for stubborn defiance. She was the one who refused to quit even when exhaustion gnawed at her body, the one who stood straight when others slumped under the weight of their packs. Some admired her resolve, but others, resentful of her grit, saw her as a target. The camp itself was a place where history's echoes lingered, portraits and names of legends like Colonel John Glenn, Colonel Buzz Aldrin, and Lieutenant Audie Murphy hung in the halls where cadets studied strategy, reminding them that greatness had been earned through fire. Every brick, every drill carried the weight of men and women who had carried rifles through jungles, deserts, and skies. The cadets were told that they were next in line, that one day their own names might be spoken with the same reverence as Colonel Anna Mae Hayes or Lieutenant Susan Cuddy, but for now they were only trainees stumbling through the long nights of relentless testing. On that storm-drenched night, the girl's presence made her rivals uneasy. She had no powerful family name, no easy reputation, only grit carved from hardship. Where others complained about the mud, she pushed harder through it. Where others hid weakness and silence, she embraced the pain and kept moving forward. The officers noticed her resolve, and that perhaps was what stirred envy among her fellow cadets. They whispered of ways to break her spirit, to remind her that she did not belong among them. The barracks were a fragile shelter against the storm, lanterns flickering through the slats of boarded windows. Inside, cadets stripped off their drenched fatigues and laughed over rations, their voices loud enough to mask the rain hammering the roof. But outside she stood alone. Her rivals had locked the door behind her under the pretense of discipline, mocking her by leaving her to endure the cold night air with nothing but her soaked gear. They had watched her step out for a drill, then slid the bolt into place. She had turned back, found the door sealed, and heard their muffled laughter through the walls. The rain poured heavier, beating down on her as though nature itself had conspired against her. But instead of despair, something hardened inside her chest. She thought of the warriors who had stood in worse storms. Lieutenant John F. Kennedy, adrift with his men after PT 109 was shattered in the Pacific. Oh, Colonel William Billy Mitchell fighting battles of vision against entire institutions. If they could hold their ground, so could she. The training camp's lights glowed faintly in the distance, but beyond them was darkness, the wilderness, where real soldiers tested themselves. She looked not at the locked barracks door, but at the storm and shadows ahead. There was a war waiting, not on a battlefield with enemies across the wire, but herein, proving that she could not be broken by betrayal or mockery. Her rivals thought they had humiliated her. They thought rain would erode her will. What they did not know was that she was already making a choice. She would not return alone. The stage was set. Somewhere beyond the storm, in the shadows of the night, the true warriors, the Navy SEALs, themselves, were running their own drills. She would find them. She would endure whatever test they demanded. And when dawn came, she would walk back into camp, not as a drenched outcast, but as a soldier with fire in her eyes and the might of legends at her back. The storm did not let up. Every gust of wind carried sheets of rain that stung like needles. Every flash of lightning lit the trees in stark white, and every thunderclap rolled through the camp like artillery. She moved through it, boots heavy with mud, body shivering, but eyes sharp with determination. The betrayal still burned in her chest. Her own cadet. Brothers and sisters had chosen mockery over loyalty. That wound cut deeper than the storm's chill. Yet, instead of breaking her, it forged her into something harder, sharper. She followed the distant echoes of gunfire, control bursts, training shots, until she reached the ridge where the Navy SEALs trained under cover of night. The first shadow appeared from the tree inn. Rifle raised, eyes narrowed under the brim of a soaked cap. For a heartbeat, it seemed she might be mistaken for an intruder. She stood tall, refusing to cower, though her body trembled from cold. Her voice, steady despite the storm, carried her plea. Train me, break me, make me into one of you. The SEALs, silence stretched long, the storm howling between them. Then, with a curt nod, he led her into the darkness where the others waited. The drills were merciless. Weighted packs dragged her, shoulders down. Rivers swallowed her boots, and the relentless rain blurred her vision. Every step tested her will. The SEALs did not go easy. They pushed, shouted, demanded she give more than her body had left. She stumbled, nearly collapsed, but each time she thought of quitting, the faces of those who had laughed at her burned in her mind. She rose again. At one point, she fell behind during a timed maneuver, her body failing against exhaustion. One of the SEALs barked at her to leave if she couldn't keep up. In that moment, fear threatened to win. Fear of failing. Fear of proving her rivals right. But she forced her breath steady, dragged herself through the mud, and shouted, back with a fire they had not expected. That defiance sparked something in them. For the first time, she saw approval in their eyes. The turning point came deep into the night when the training shifted from endurance to combat simulation. Explosives thundered in the distance. Tracer rounds cracked through the rain, and smoke thickened the air. The SEALs moved like phantoms, swift and coordinated, while she struggled to keep up. Then the unexpected happened. A live test, harsher than any drill. A figure moved in the dark, not part of their team, firing blanks that cracked too close. It was an ambush drill designed to break confidence. Chaos erupted. She froze for an instant, fear clawing at her chest. A SEAL nearest her was taken out by the surprise strike, falling into the mud, signaling elimination. For the first time, she wasn't just a trainee. She was part of the fight. Heart-hammering, she dragged his heavy gear through the muck, refusing to leave him behind, even in simulation. Her body screamed in pain, but loyalty roared louder. The team saw it. She wasn't simply surviving. She was protecting. By the time the ambush ended, her hands were torn raw, her lips blue from cold, but her spirit burned like fire. The SEAL commander stepped close, rain dripping from his cap, eyes hard but respectful. "You've got fight," he said, simply, his tone carrying the weight of men who had seen real war. It was not a declaration of victory. It was an invitation to endure more. Each trial bled into the next, crawling under wire. As thunder cracked overhead, scaling slick walls with nothing but grit, hauling sandbags until her muscles screamed. The night became endless, and her body felt on the edge of breaking. Yet every time she thought of surrendering, she remembered the locked barracks door, the laughter behind it, and the names of warriors before her. Colonel Charles Young, who carried courage beyond limits, Lieutenant Edward Butcher Hare, who turned the tide alone. She whispered their names under her breath like prayers to keep moving. What next? That question haunted her with every push, every step, every strike of lightning. But beneath the fear grew something stronger, the knowledge that She was no longer just a cadet trying to belong. She was proving herself in the crucible of fire and storm, where betrayal had driven her, and where loyalty was teaching her the true cost of courage. And when dawn broke, the world would not see the same girl who had been locked outside. They would see a soldier forged in the storm. Dawn broke slowly, a gray light spilling across the horizon as the storm finally began to ease. The rain softened to a drizzle, and the thunder that had rattled the camp through the night faded into silence. What remained was the wreckage of endurance, mud-caked boots, torn fatigues, and faces etched with exhaustion. Among the Navy SEALs stood the girl, soaked to her core, but unbroken, her eyes carrying the fire of a night survived. She had stood shoulder to shoulder with warriors who lived by discipline and sacrifice, and though she had not yet earned their trident, she had won something more immediate, their respect. When the unit moved back toward the academy, she marched in the front ranks. Her steps were steady despite the ache in her bones, and behind her the SEALs walked in unison, their presence a living shield. As the camp came into view, cadets still half asleep in their bunks stumbled outside at the sight of the column. Their laughter from the night before died on their lips as they saw who led the returning warriors. She was no longer the outcast they had shoved into the rain. She was something far greater, someone who had walked through the storm and returned with a kind of backing that no prank or betrayal could erase. The officers emerged, called by the spectacle. Even hardened men who had seen countless cadets break under pressure paused at the sight. One SEAL commander stepped forward, addressing them all in a voice that carried like command fire. He did not praise her directly. Instead, he told the cadets that courage was not measured by lineage, favoritism, or numbers, but by what a soldier did when every comfort was stripped away. He compared her resolve to Colonel Muriel Tangersdal, who flew missions in skies where few dared to go, and to Lieutenant Audi Murphy, who held ground against impossible odds. His words hung heavy in the damp morning air, cutting deeper than any reprimand. For the girl, the victory was not in humiliation avenged, but in transformation. She no longer needed their approval, nor did she seek revenge. What she had gained was proof to herself that she could endure betrayal, survive the storm, and rise stronger than before. The cadets who had locked her out could not meet her gaze. Some turned away in shame. Others stood frozen, realizing they had tried to break someone who could not be bent. The consequence of that night rippled beyond. Within weeks, the story spread through the academy and beyond, carried by whispers and retellings. Cadets who, once dismissive, began to train harder, driven not by fear, but by the example she had set. Officers noted a shift in the unit's discipline, where rivalry once bred division. Endurance began to foster respect. She had become a quiet legend among them, the cadet who had walked through fire and returned with the fiercest warriors at her side. Years later, when she herself rose through the ranks, she would look back on that night not with bitterness, but with pride. It was the moment betrayal turned into steel, the moment her story aligned with those of Colonel John Glenn, Colonel Buzz Aldrin, Colonel Anna Mae Hayes, and countless others who had borne trials and carried forward. She had not won a medal that night, nor did her name appear in any official record, but the legacy she carved was deeper than decoration. It was etched into every cadet who whispered her story as a lesson in courage. The storm had been meant to break her. Instead, it had crowned her. And though history might never record the night she returned with the Navy SEALs behind her, those who witnessed it would never forget. Some victories live only in the hearts of those changed by them, And hers was one of those rare, unsung triumphs that echo like thunder long after the storm has passed.